what reputation, whatever I have, is based mostly on having written songs. And I consider myself primarily a performer, an entertainer.
John Denver, a name seemingly bound to country roads, mountain air, and tender love songs, carried within him a far more complex journey than the gentle music he left behind. People know him through Take Me Home, Country Roads, A Lullaby for America, or Annie's Song, perhaps the simplest love song ever sung on a grand stage. But few realize that behind that gentle smile and those clear eyes was a boy who had wandered from one military base to another, following his father, growing up in loneliness, belittled by the very man who raised him, forever searching for a place he could call home. He once sawed his marriage bed in half with a chainsaw after a bitter divorce. He was arrested for drunk driving. He isolated himself in the forests of Colorado, writing music like letters to a world in which he always felt like an outsider. And then, one October day in 1997, he climbed into the cockpit of a small experimental aircraft, took off, and never returned. That death didn't just mark the end of a musician's life. It felt like a destiny already written in the very songs he had composed. Songs about freedom, about loneliness, and a yearning to dissolve into nature. John Denver wasn't an angel, but he was living proof of this. A sensitive soul, no matter how cracked, can still warm the world simply through honest music. And when you listen to him sing, you begin to understand why America once placed its trust in a man who carried nothing but a wooden guitar and a heart full of sunlight. Early life. John Denver was born in the heart of the desert, yet inside that little boy stirred a forest waiting to grow. His birth name was Henry John Deutschendorf Jr., born on December 31st, 1943, in Roswell, New Mexico, a small town famous for tales of aliens, though for John it was just another temporary stop in a childhood without anchors. He was the firstborn of Henry Dutch Deutschendorf Sr., a distinguished pilot in the U.S. Air Force, and Irma Louise, a gentle homemaker who quietly dedicated her life to her husband and children without ever asking for anything in return. The Deutschendorf family wasn't poor, nor particularly wealthy, but what their home lacked most was affection and emotional presence. John's father embodied the post-war American ideal of manhood: disciplined, distant, never one to complain, and above all, never one to show emotion. Henry Sr. once set a speed-flying record and was a model soldier admired by his peers. But at home, he loomed like a silent shadow, a figure of stern authority that kept young John in a constant state of caution. He never patted his son on the back, never said, "I'm proud of you," never said, "I love you." And for a boy as sensitive as John, that was a void nothing else could fill. Because of his father's career, the family was constantly on the move, a military life ill-suited for a child who craved stability. From Roswell to Tucson, then Fort Worth, Texas, followed by Montgomery, Alabama, Scottsdale, Arizona, and even a stint at an Air Force base in Japan, the list of temporary homes was endless. John never stayed anywhere long enough to make friends, to take root. Classmates, teachers, schools, all of them blurred together like a slideshow of passing towns. While other children played soccer or went camping, John sat alone in his room sketching forests he had never seen and dreaming of a place he could call home. Not a house, but a place where he could simply be himself. "Even when I was with my family, I still felt like a stranger," he once wrote in his journal. The single bright spot in his childhood was his maternal grandmother, Emma Swope, the only person in the family who truly understood the dreamy boy. When John turned 11, she gave him a gift he would later call a salvation: a Gibson guitar. From that moment, a door opened. He spent hours in a corner of his room, learning chords, singing to himself stories only he understood. Music became his only loyal companion, the home he could carry with him anywhere. No matter how often they moved or how distant people grew, the guitar was always there, gentle and faithful. John's teenage years were marked by withdrawal. He didn't stand out in school, wasn't good at sports, and had no interest in the military activities his father tried to steer him toward. He loved astronomy, wrote poetry, and quietly listened to the Weavers, Woody Guthrie, and later, Peter, Paul, and Mary. Each song felt like a letter from another world, a world John believed he might belong to if he was lucky. The relationship between John and his father only grew more strained. Henry Sr. saw his son's sensitivity as weakness and constantly tried to mold him into the ideal man. Strong, stoic, practical. John, in contrast, kept retreating further inward. Music became his final refuge, the only place he could pour everything he couldn't say. And even though no one believed in that dream, John kept playing, kept singing, kept writing, as if that were the only way to keep himself from falling apart. At 17, he graduated from high school in Texas and enrolled at Texas Tech University to study architecture, largely due to family pressure. But deep down, he knew he couldn't live a life drawing blueprints. The only thing he could draw was a vision of freedom through song. Not long after, John quietly dropped out, left everything behind, and with his guitar in hand, set off across America to find himself. No one, not even John, could have imagined that the boy who always felt out of place was about to write the unofficial national anthem for lonely souls across the world. Early career. John Denver dropped out of Texas Tech at the age of 19, packing everything he owned: his guitar, a notebook filled with half-finished lyrics, and a fragile belief that music might be his way of life. While his peers donned graduation gowns or joined the military as their parents hoped, John took the opposite path, heading to Los Angeles, a city of glittering dreams, but also harsh realities and constant doubt. He played music in small coffee shops, performed at student clubs, lounges, anywhere that had a microphone and an audience willing to listen. At the time, folk music was becoming the voice of protest. Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Pete Seeger were shaping the movement. But John was different. He didn't sing about politics or protest. He sang about simple things: love, nature, longing, homecoming, things slowly fading from the heart of an urbanizing America. The first turning point came in 1965, when John joined the well-known folk group, the Chad Mitchell Trio, replacing their departing frontman. Despite being the newcomer, John quickly demonstrated his gift for songwriting and his pure, emotive voice. But more importantly, he was finally on a professional stage, recording in studios, learning how the industry worked, and most crucially, he was being heard. It was during this time that he decided to drop the unwieldy name Deutschendorf Jr., which no one could remember, and adopted the stage name John Denver, simple, memorable, and symbolic. Denver, the capital of Colorado, a place he had once visited and instantly fallen in love with. The Rocky Mountains had etched themselves into his soul, not just geographically but spiritually. In 1967, Denver left the Mitchell Trio to pursue a solo career. It was a risky move, leaving a recognized name to start from scratch, alone. But he had something no one else did, a song titled "Babe, I Hate to Go," a humble demo that would later be renamed "Leaving on a Jet Plane." In 1969, the folk trio Peter, Paul, and Mary heard John's recording and decided to cover the song. No one expected "Leaving on a Jet Plane" to become their first and only #1 hit, catapulting John Denver's name onto the Billboard charts for the very first time, though the public still knew little about the man behind the song. But that moment swung the doors wide open. Record labels began to notice the golden-haired young man with an unforced way of singing. He signed with RCA Records and in 1969 released his debut solo album, Rhymes and Reasons. Though it wasn't a breakout success, the inclusion of "Leaving on a Jet Plane" in his own voice began to draw listeners to him, not for fame, but for the sincerity they heard in his singing. In the years that followed, John roamed across America, performing night after night, from modest Midwestern halls to outdoor summer festivals. He didn't have a flashy PR team or massive ad campaigns. He had only his guitar, a handful of self-written songs, and an unwavering belief that music could connect people across class, race, and political divides. John Denver wasn't a rebel, but he also didn't conform. He wasn't a symbol of protest, but neither did he bow to trends. He sang as if whispering to each person in the audience, and strangely enough, people stayed after the shows, not to ask for autographs, but to talk. Some cried, some spoke of homesickness, some simply said, "Thank you for singing what I couldn't put into words." His career hadn't exploded yet, but it was being built layer by layer with patience and integrity. And soon, in just a few more years, that lonely boy once deemed too soft by his father would become one of America's most successful solo artists, and the voice of a more imagined America, peaceful, sincere, unhurried, and honest. Career breakthrough. In the early 1970s, America was reeling from the aftershocks of the Vietnam War, the counterculture movement, and widespread social unrest. People were exhausted by anger and noise, yearning for a gentler, more compassionate sound. And into that moment stepped a voice, warm as morning sunlight, simple as homesickness, that quietly found its way into the hearts of millions. John Denver. In 1971, John released the album Poems, Prayers, and Promises, his first true breakthrough as a solo artist. The song Take Me Home, Country Roads from that album became an instant phenomenon. It was about longing for rural West Virginia, a place John had never actually lived in, but somehow it made millions of Americans feel like they were returning to their roots. The song climbed to #1, 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, becoming the first folk-flavored country song to gain such broad national appeal. It would later be dubbed the unofficial anthem of West Virginia. Hits followed in rapid succession. Sunshine on My Shoulders, a soft meditation on the need for warmth during cold days, #1 on Billboard in 1974. Annie's Song, a tender, aching love song for his first wife, written in just 10 minutes while skiing in Aspen, also a Billboard #1. Rocky Mountain High, a love letter to the Colorado wilderness, which was once investigated by the FCC for allegedly promoting drug use, though it was really about the spiritual high of standing in nature. At a time dominated by disco and hard rock, John Denver seemed like an outsider, yet somehow landed right at the heart of American culture. He didn't wear flamboyant outfits or put on loud shows. He was just a man with a wooden guitar, round glasses, and a voice like a personal letter. But that sincerity is what made people stay. From 1973 to 1975, John Denver had 4 #1 hits. 1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100, numerous platinum-certified albums, and was named Artist of the Year at the 1975 American Music Awards. He appeared on the cover of Time magazine, performed at the White House, and became one of the highest-grossing solo concert acts in the United States. Not content with just music, John ventured into film and television. His most notable acting role came in the 1977 comedy Oh God, opposite George Burns, a surprise commercial and critical success that showcased his natural, unpolished acting charm. He also produced several successful television specials, like An Evening with John Denver and Rocky Mountain Holiday with the Muppets, programs that entertained while promoting love for nature and environmental awareness. Remarkably, at the height of his fame, John refused to follow trends. He declined commercial remixes and avoided singing about topics he didn't believe in. Instead, he wrote his own songs, produced his own music, and stayed true to a promise. If I don't believe in what I'm singing, I won't sing it. That's why, even though critics sometimes dismissed his work as too soft or too simple, His music endured in the hearts of the public for decades. Behind the spotlight, John did something few pop stars of the era considered. He used music as a vehicle for purpose. He organized benefit concerts for UNICEF, campaigned for environmental protection, collaborated with scientists, and founded the WinStar Foundation, an organization dedicated to promoting peace, ecological stewardship, and public education. In 1977, he was invited to perform in the Soviet Union, becoming one of the few Western artists granted such access by the Soviet authorities. There, in the heart of the Cold War, he performed "Let Us Begin," a song calling for nuclear disarmament. The concert hall fell silent, and when the song ended, it erupted in tears and thunderous applause. John Denver wasn't just commercially successful. He became a cultural symbol, a representative of another America, peaceful, empathetic, rooted in the land and bathed in natural light, where people treated each other with kindness instead of confrontation. And strangely enough, among the thousands of big names in American music during that era, it was John Denver, with his glasses, soft voice, and excess of emotion, who made an entire nation feel comforted. Personal life. In John Denver's music, love always appeared as something gentle, whole, and almost eternal. But in real life, love was the most fragile thing of all, delicate as the melodies he wrote. In 1967, still quietly navigating the early stages of his artistic journey, John met Annie Martell, a young woman with brown hair and a calm gaze, at a performance in Minnesota. Their meeting had no fireworks, no cinematic romance, just a wandering musician and a college student who believed his voice could soften the grayness of life. They fell in love quickly, not out of passion, but from recognizing something familiar in each other in a world too vast. After marrying, they moved together to Aspen, a quiet mountain town where John would write his first love songs in a warm wooden cabin during the cold winters. In those early years, their love resembled the chorus of Annie's song, simple, complete, and filled with imagery, from snow-covered slopes to wind rustling through pine trees. He once said, "I wrote that song for Annie, but really it was everything I ever dreamed of holding on to in life." They had no biological children, but adopted two, Zachary and Anna Kate, with the intention of building the kind of home neither of them had growing up. John adored his children so much that he wrote them letters every week while on tour. But no matter how hard he tried to create an ideal family, John couldn't admit one truth: music and success always demanded sacrifices that love couldn't always withstand. Annie was not someone drawn to the spotlight, nor a woman built for life with a man who lived on the road. Gradually, the distance between them wasn't geographical. It was the quiet that grew between two souls who once harmonized. They tried, but eventually withdrew from each other's lives. When they divorced in 1982, John said little publicly. But during performances afterward, audiences would notice his eyes dim when he sang songs once written for Annie, as if every lyric was a living memory he could no longer touch. Later, John married again, this time to Cassandra Delaney, an Australian actress, in the late 1980s. By then, he had seen both fame and loss, and Cassandra entered his life like a fresh breeze, youthful, free-spirited, and captivating. They had one daughter together, Jessie Bell, and for a time, John hoped this could be a new beginning, a more mature version of himself in marriage. But love is never just about hope. In his later years, John wrestled with things music couldn't fix: the feeling of being misunderstood, the loneliness of returning to an empty house, and a quiet anger with no clear target. After divorcing Cassandra, he entered a period of quiet depression, not loud, not public, but evident in moments of loss of control. During a property dispute after the divorce, he shocked many by using a chainsaw to destroy the couple's bed in a fit of rage. The act, widely reported as a psychological breakdown, was in fact a silent confession. John, who had always tried to write about tenderness, had been defeated by the anger he never dared to name. There were nights he was arrested for driving under the influence, first in Colorado, then later in California. These short news stories never overshadowed his musical legacy, but they did paint a portrait of a man, once the dream of America, now struggling to find himself again when love songs were no longer enough to hold things together. And yet, what matters most is not the personal failures, but the way John continued to live. Still writing, still performing, still sending letters to his daughter, still believing that no matter how many times love may break, the important thing is never to stop searching for it. Final years and legacy. There was a strange stillness surrounding John Denver in his final years. The cheers of thousands had faded. Billboard charts no longer bore his name, and no new songs echoed across America. But in that quiet, John seemed to finally return to himself, no longer trying to prove anything, no longer needing to play the gentle hero. He lived in a wooden cabin in Aspen, the same place where his earliest songs were born, and chose a solitary life, like a seasoned mountaineer who sticks to the trail. Even if he sometimes gets lost, he never turns back. It was a time when the music industry had largely forgotten him, not because the audience turned away, but because the era had shifted. Songs about mountains, sunlight, and gratitude now seemed too soft for a world growing used to rebellion and speed. Major labels refused to release his work. Critics who once praised him now fell silent. John didn't fight back. He founded his own label, funded his own recordings, and released what he believed was worth sharing, even if no one listened. But he still did it, because he had never sung to please anyone but his own heart. During this period, he devoted more time to activism, especially environmental causes. His songs became more than music. They became tools for advocacy, reforestation, wildlife protection, anti-war messages, and promotion of renewable energy. In 1992, the United Nations named him Speaker for the Planet. But what made him happiest was something far simpler. Morning walks with his young daughter Jessie Bell under the pine trees, where birdsong was the kind of harmony he had always been chasing. And then came the day he took off one last time. On October 12, 1997, John Denver piloted a small experimental aircraft, a Long EZ model he had recently purchased and wasn't fully familiar with. The plane wasn't officially certified, its fuel gauge was faulty, and the auxiliary tank was located behind the pilot's seat, making in-flight refueling nearly impossible. Yet John still took off, just as he always had with music, with instinct and a longing for freedom. The flight lasted only minutes. The Long EZ crashed into Monterey Bay, California. When his body was recovered, the ring on his finger was still intact. Among the wreckage, they found pieces of a man who once sang of the sky as if it were his true home. News of his death shook America. It wasn't loud like the passing of a rock star, nor tragic like a Hollywood downfall, but the loss was deeply felt, spreading through small towns and across the hearts of those who loved his gentle voice, as if a part of the collective memory had quietly been removed. John Denver died at 53, far younger than the age he deserved to live. But what he left behind aged far beyond his years. His music wasn't just a set of recordings, it became a space, a memory one could always return to. Today, Take Me Home, Country Roads isn't just a song. It's sung at graduations, funerals, football games, and in small-town bars where homesick souls recall the days before life grew so weary. Rocky Mountain High has been officially recognized as one of Colorado's 2 state songs. And in West Virginia, you can still find his picture hanging in a small-town bakery as if he were a native son of a land he never lived in, but whose spirit his music chose to call home. John's legacy isn't about greatness, it's about kindness. He didn't leave behind monuments, but instead created a space for others to find themselves, in sunlight, in streams, in the soft whisper of, "You fill up my senses." that nearly everyone has heard at least once in their life. And in that way, John Denver, a man who never truly found a home, became the voice of all those who feel lost. And in every song he left behind, the world was gifted a road leading home. John Denver was never someone who fit in with the crowd. He didn't live to become a legend, nor did he write songs to be a hero. He was simply a man who once felt small within his own family, lost in a world where his father told him he had to be strong, and who spent his whole life searching for a place he could call home. And perhaps what made John Denver unforgettable wasn't his talent, though he had plenty of that. It was the fact that he never hid who he was. When he was sad, he wrote sadness. When he loved, he wrote love. When he was hurt, he didn't pretend otherwise. And it was that very vulnerability that made millions feel closer to him than to any artist they had ever idolized. In a world growing louder by the day, where art increasingly has to shout to be noticed, John held on to a principle so simple it felt old-fashioned. I will sing what I believe. That line, seemingly too naive to survive, was, in the end, what sustained him for nearly 3 decades. And when he passed, people didn't just mourn an artist. They mourned a kind of kindness, a slower, more honest world, one where sunlight alone was enough to inspire a song. If music is the map of collective memory, then John Denver was the narrow road that leads back to childhood, to a time when our parents were still alive, to a kitchen that smelled of toast, and to the wind whispering on the porch. He didn't write songs to make people cheer. He wrote so they would fall silent and hear themselves. He once said, "I don't need to be remembered as a star. I just hope that when someone listens to my music, they feel a little softer." And maybe, in that softening, John Denver lived longer than a lifetime.